no other technology, at least in the past 20 to 25 years, has caused this kind of view where everything is on the table.
An awful lot of people were not going to crypto because of the freedom, but they're going because it was a gambling casino that they thought they could make some cash. And
What even is creativity truly?
this is not good because you're kind of taking away a little bit of my cope.
We're getting to the point where people, like smart people, like scientists, are going, yeah, I did not see that coming.
Like these machines showing up saying that we're going to get rid of all the inefficiencies. You're like, oh my God, the Terminator came to punish us. It's
ChatGPT or GPT-4 already is displaying behavior that looks like human creativity.
The fundamental experience of work is going to change in a dramatic way. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the AI Bionic Marketing Podcast. I'm here with Mr. Sam Woods, and we wanted to discuss the ever-changing reality we have right now of modern AI and what is going on. So I want to interview this man and pick his brain because he has an awful lot of information about this, having worked in it for 3 years. And he was kind of ahead of the trend of what was going on with AI long before any of the rest of us. So he has that kind of contextual wisdom that an awful lot of people lack. Everybody's getting very emotional about this. This is a man he's jaded. He's got the 1,000-yard stare from being in the trenches. So I think he's a good authority to listen to on this stuff. So Mr. Sam, you've been doing an awful lot of conferences recently, and you have been working with a lot of people, working with a lot of companies. And me and you have been talking about this privately, and I just find it fascinating seeing the culture react to this at those very high levels, the culture reacting very quickly to, oh my God, what's going on? How do we deal with this and all this stuff? So if you could tell us a little bit about some of the dominant issues that people are coming across. For example, they're worried about, do they start to outsource the workforce and transform that? Are they thinking about buying certain companies? Do they see it like crypto? They have to get in early, or like early social media? There's struggles maybe with legal and compliance and training their own versions of things and whatnot. So please tell us about some of that stuff, and we will go through it and dive into it now.
Yeah, the reaction covers the full spectrum. You have people who are thinking to themselves and planning on how they can replace people on their teams, and they're talking about replacing anything from 20 to 30% of their workforce in different departments, depending on what they do. And I think the reason why is the past 10 years, maybe more, but the economic climate up until now has been that money has been cheap and widely available. And so companies have hired a lot of people and bloated their workforce. And so I think that naturally, even without AI, a lot of companies would want to trim down anyway, just because the economy isn't doing that great right now and doesn't look like it'll do too great. But AI provides them an opportunity to let go of a lot of people that are probably not necessary, and then still not lose out on the work getting done, because in their mind, they see AI and AI tools and machine learning tools as able to replace a lot of the work that these people are doing. So you got that end of the spectrum, like how do we replace people without losing productivity and without sacrificing work getting done? And it spans all the way to like, how do we train our own models? And so companies are looking at how do we take either existing open source large language models and train it, so to speak, or fine tune it on our own data and our own business details and information. And so we have our own internally, because wisely so, most companies do not trust OpenAI to not pick up on their trade secrets, right? So they don't want their employees to feed ChatGPT or other models, GPT-4, any of their trade secrets or institutional knowledge that they have, like things that you develop as you have a company. You have processes, you have knowledge bases and so on. They just don't want that out into the world and fed to these other language models. And they're also asking, what competitors should we buy now in anticipation of what might happen in a couple of years? And what tools do we invest in? Do we build our own tools, or do we invest in existing tools? How do we get our team members to be more productive? And there are studies that are pretty good studies that show that with proper use of AI tools, people's productivity goes up 25 to 30%, depending on what they're doing. So everyone is essentially grasping after everything, and they're looking for ways to integrate it, ways to make use of it, either investing, building, replacing people, and all of it. So this is, from what I hear and people I speak with, no other technology, at least in the past 20 to 25 years, has caused this kind of view where everything is on the table. Like when crypto came along and Web3, like some departments in a company cared about it, but most didn't. But this, what we're seeing with AI, all of a sudden, everything is on, like everything is on the table. Everything in a company and teams and how to do stuff and marketing and sales and everything is on the table all of a sudden. And they're all grasping for something to do.
This is very interesting, and this is actually a really good point, because crypto comes along and it makes these big promises about how we're all going to change our behavior, and in some sense we have a little bit, a very small amount. But I learned about the wallets because I was looking to catch pumps with various things, and obviously investing in maybe Bitcoin and stuff like this, but it hasn't in any way tangibly changed my life. But when I see this stuff, it's like the fundamental experience of work is going to change in a dramatic way. And I remember seeing those TikTok videos of like the girls. They would be they would be showing videos of them, their day in the office in the tech company or something like this, or there's like guys doing it as well. And it's just like, go to the cafeteria, go to the buffet. It kind of looks like enjoyable. It looks like a playground for adults or something like that.
Yeah.
And then now you see this show up, and it's basically like these machines showing up saying that we're going to get rid of all the inefficiencies. You're like, oh my God, the Terminator came to punish us. It's a bad thing.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you a specific question on this then, because the question of replacement, the big anxiety, or maybe the big money honeypot for companies. Yeah. They're like, yes, this is what we want. Are you generally finding yourself saying, okay, I'm going to train AI to replace individuals? Like we could literally get a ChatGPT to represent an employee avatar. So, Steph, the YouTuber, gets transformed into this GPT that replaces him entirely, and he's given his briefcase and told to get the fuck out? Or is it an instance where we have like AI is obviously maybe not going to be able to reflect the human personality, and so instead what we find happening is that ChatGPT is taking over large areas of processes, but not maybe individual people? And so do you see some people might be looking at like, oh my, I'm not going to have to do maybe as much paperwork, and if I can just demonstrate my human skills are more advanced, I'll probably actually keep my job, and I'll be forced to learn how to use this AI in order to enhance my job and make these more monotonous versions parts of my job more efficient? What do you find yourself generally saying? And imagine it's a bit of a blend of both.
It's a bit of a blend, but most of the time it's how AI is integrated into a process or something that you're doing without the view of replacing people. Like right now, AI can't completely replace someone, and that'll probably be true for several years, because even though it's come a long way, the way work is done, it requires people at different parts in the process, whether at the beginning, at the middle, or at the end. And so it's more so that machine learning and AI is becoming integrated into existing workflows. And what'll happen is that you'll realize, oh, well, Bob used to do XYZ. Like he used to create the content, as an example, and like modify it and edit it and then put it out. Bob will still do that, but AI will do like 80% of the work, and he manages the flow of it and how it plays out and what gets the final cut. So even though AI can produce like 100 tweets in like minutes, not all 100 tweets are going to be good. And even so, there's no way yet to then have those 100 tweets created, and then with the click of a button, it gets populated to your social profiles or anything like that. That's coming. But if you were paying Bob to copy and paste content before, like why would you keep paying Bob to copy and paste content, right? So Bob's job will be more about, well, out of these 100 tweets or LinkedIn posts, maybe only 40 of them are good enough or something that we want to say, right? So there's an insane amount of potential that comes with AI, but it's not all useful potential. Like just because you can do something doesn't mean that you need to or that you have to, right? So the game is going to be how do you integrate AI where it makes sense, and how do you make a decision as to where it doesn't make sense to add AI to the mix? So it's mostly just workflow and process and finding spots for it. I think over the next, 5 years, there are going to be a lot of people replaced. but it'll also change. Like it also, like your work will change so that even if you're not replaced, you're going to find a way to integrate it. Because where's my phone? So like with crypto and Web3 and so on, the key flaw, and this is true for any technology, if there's too many big changes for a human to adapt to, and for our behavior to change, the less likely tech is to succeed. But if you go about your daily life, the way you do things and the way you do work remains mostly the same, like 80% the same. You open up Microsoft Word, you do the spreadsheets. If your overall behavior doesn't have to change, then you're more likely to adopt the tech that comes with it. And that's what we're seeing with AI and machine learning, is being integrated into everything we're doing. So Microsoft is adding it to all the things: Word, PowerPoint, Excel. And that's true for all, like most, if not all software will have some kind of AI integrated into it, so that you don't have, like, if I'm a worker and I have used Microsoft Word for years, I don't all of a sudden need to change my tech and use something else. I can keep using Microsoft Word. It'll just be a Clippy on steroids, or Clippy the Terminator will be on the side, the little paper clip. He'll be on the side, and instead of saying dumb, yeah, he's back. And instead of saying dumb stuff, like, he'll say in useful things and give useful suggestions, right? And so same thing with our phones. It'll all be integrated into our phones, like, across all the things. Like, if you from now on, when you take a photo, most likely Apple or Google or Samsung or all the other ones, they'll just find a way to integrate AI into the camera and into the photo, like, image app, so that AI in the background does all the modifications, like adjustments to lighting, saturation, brightness, and so on. And it'll also then provide you with filters right inside the phone. So like all the Lensa profile photos people took, like, we're going to quickly get to the point where I just take a photo of myself, and then I don't even have to open up the Lensa app or any other app. Inside iPhone's own photo app, I'll be able to do my AI avatar. So it's becoming ubiquitous. And because it's becoming ubiquitous and everywhere and everything all the time, this is why it'll be adopted more readily than crypto, because crypto requires you to change your behavior, and it's complicated. And for most people, it's just too complicated to have a wallet and an address, and then, like, what do I do with it? So I think the key that is so easy to be integrated is why it'll change everything too, because not much is required on my end. I don't have to change everything I do. I just have to adjust a little bit and make some tweaks to my workflow, but it'll be there.
Mm-hmm. But there's so much interesting stuff in there. Kind of what you're popping into my mind is thinking about crypto. I guess it's sort of a tragic realization that I guess crypto trades on the philosophy and value of, you could say, decentralization and freedom.
Yeah.
But entropy doesn't work that way. People will go towards AI if it's more powerful, and that will draw people towards it. The same reason as why people went to crypto is it was never really an awful lot of people were not going to crypto because of the freedom, but they're going because it was a gambling casino that they thought they could make some cash. And so if AI is able to enhance your power, and you have to adapt to it for that reason, it will be hugely incentivized to learn. And then if it's also seamless to integrate into things as you're describing it, that's great. And that opens up the second question that I have about the whole conceptualization of artificial intelligence in and of itself. I'm looking at that piece of jargon, and the more I look at this, I wonder, like, is that the way that we should be thinking about it? Because it becomes this separate entity inside of our heads when we say artificial intelligence. But you've already described the clip guy, the clip guy from the internet back in the day, and the little helper. Is there, do you think there's maybe a better way that people can conceptualize it, not as like artificial intelligence, but as like is it automation now expanded into becoming maybe generation? Is there any ways you're playing with this stuff? There might not be, but I'm just sort of asking, are you juggling with this at all? And are you noticing people come in with preconceived notions about what AI is that actually stops them seeing the way it's going to work? It's not going to be some mid journey that's hidden in some realm of the internet that you can visit. It's going to be in your iPhone, in your Instagram app. When you want to take your picture, the filters are going to be connected to AI. As you said, After Effects for photographers, it's all going to have it run in. I'm using runway.ml right now, a video editing suite. And that's a great example of a video editor that's just integrating all these AI tools. So what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I wish everyone is calling it AI, and I wish we could go back in time to like last year and correct the terminology used, because the reality is like ChatGPT is not like it falls under the wider umbrella term of artificial intelligence, but it's really a machine learning tool. And machine learning is not exactly the same as artificial intelligence. And there's a history of like AI has been spoken about for decades. You know, when computers came along, like you have the first ChatGPT was, I think, Eliza or something. It's a software program from the 1960s that functioned in the same way. You chat with it and it gives you a response back. So like this idea of an artificial intelligence that is as smart as you and can interact with you in any way, shape, or form through speech, text, and anything else, like that idea is old. But because people have like mixed with sci-fi and reality, people have a view, like you said, of what artificial intelligence is. And it's not like we're not seeing that exact scenario play out now, which is confusing people. Because when you think artificial intelligence, this is why people go, oh, ChatGPT is dumb. Like it can't do facts. It can't do this. It gets a lot of things wrong. It's because in their mind, they expect an intelligence that is smarter than them and knows everything. And so it should get all the facts right. But if that's your view of it, then you're also limiting yourself and you're shooting yourself in the foot, because the way to think about ChatGPT and all these other tools like it, we're talking about generative AI. So these are tools that can generate, at this point, almost anything: audio, video, text, whatever creative form we know can be now generated. And because of that, because it falls on the side of creativity, these tools like ChatGPT you're better off thinking of it as a collaborator, a creative assistant, someone you can brainstorm with. And even when I say that, someone you can brainstorm with, we anthropomorphize AI all the time. And I do it too, because it's right now is the easiest way to explain it. But because it's easy to explain it that way, we also lose a lot of clarity around what it is. So when I say it can help you, it doesn't actually on its own help you. It becomes a reflection of you when you use it. Whatever input you give it, it'll give you output back based on the input. And so if ChatGPT is ever able to, or other language models, if they're ever able to transcend what they are, which is their language models, and so it can only give you data back or output back based on what it's been trained on. And because it's been trained on what us as humans have produced, it'll only ever be able to reflect back what already exists. The key moment will come when it can give us something that did not exist before. And we're starting to see a little bit of that. So they've trained models on like protein, what do you call it, protein mapping and so on, where you can synthesize new proteins. And you see this with drug discovery. Like if you have models that combine the science of like drugs and medicine and compounds and protein folds and so on, it's starting to become able to create new elements, new things, new drugs out of almost thin air, in a way that when scientists look at the output, they go, yeah, I would have never thought about that. Like I don't think we would have, like, maybe give it 30 years and a lot of smart people in one room for 30 years sitting there chugging information. Maybe we would have together been able to come up with these combinations. But we're getting to the point where people, like smart people, like scientists, are going, yeah, I did not see that coming. Or like, yeah, I can't, like, nothing in the previous literature of like scientific literature and research indicated that we could do this with proteins. But now AI tells us we can. And then when we try it out in the real world,
oh
it
my
works.
God. Oh my God. So that's like,
So
that's actually
do you see what I'm saying? We're getting to the point where like it used to be limited by our knowledge because it was trained on our knowledge. But we're getting to the point where it's starting to surpass what we could collectively do, even given enough time.
Sam, you're all right. This is not good, but you're kind of taking away a little bit of my cope. Like I was always looking at AI very similar to what you were saying, where I was saying like it's machine learning. I understood it almost instantly when I started to play with it. Like Sam's a veteran. I'm a sort of I've been through maybe my first couple of battles. I'm a little bit ahead of the curve with this. So I was playing with AI a couple of months ago when it first came out. And I could see very quickly that it was not conscious, and it was not making decisions in the way that people understand it. And it's not a personality. It's almost like a pattern organizer that generates these. It's generative. I think the word generative is really powerful for it. And as Sam was saying earlier, it can give you 100 tweets, but 10 of them might be relevant, and you probably have to edit those 10. But of those 10, they're going to be money no, and you'll produce them way faster than you would otherwise. Now, I always say to myself then that like what this seems like it's presenting itself as is a manifestation of that generative power. It's like, pattern creation, but it doesn't have that divine spark, I guess you could say, or that creative spark. But you're saying to me now that it's starting to show that, I guess, when enough pattern capacity is compacted into these things, when the neural network gets dense enough and gets vivid enough, it can start to do things that are just starting to get surreal. Like it can pinpoint creative possibilities that just genuinely blow the face off people and whatnot.
Yeah, and you said the key word, creativity. We as humans, so here's the thing that's even as I've been doing this for years now, still like every day when I think about this, I'm not sure what to do with it. So us as humans, we have a view of what creativity is. And it's often like we know that nothing like, can we create something out of nothing? Most likely not, because we like a creative act is combining different things. It's connecting dots. It's taking something that exists and turning it into something else. And so our view of creativity is that it builds upon what already exists, and then we do something new with it, or somewhat new. Now, here's the hard part.
Oh no.
ChatGPT or GPT-4 now already, like, this is still early. Like we have to understand this is early. Already is displaying behavior that looks and quacks and walks like human creativity. Even though under the hood, we know that it's not creative. We know that it's not sentient. We know that it doesn't think, it doesn't reason, it doesn't do the things we think of as what humans do in a human way. But the output is the output. And if the output of a text or an image or a video, we look at it, and if we know that a human made it, we go, oh, that's really creative. Like it's fresh, it's new, it's different. It's a new spin on an old thing. It's like it's creative. We can't tell anymore, and we're quickly getting to the point where nothing that is made, we are not able to distinguish between whether a human made it or an AI made it, because it looks creative. And if it looks creative and if it looks like it's new, who cares if technically speaking is not creative? It looks like it, so why does it matter? So here's then where we'll come full circle. We're going to start having to ask ourselves, and some people have already, but we're going to have to start asking ourselves, what even is creativity truly? What even is sentience? What even is consciousness? Like, what even is it? Because if this thing acts like it without having what we think of typically as something that humans only possess, then what do we do with it? And some will say that, oh, this, when it creates things, is all a mirage. Like the behavior is a mirage because it's just pretending or imitating. Yeah, but humans pretend and imitate all the time. Like how do kids learn? They look and they imitate.
Yeah.
So do you, like we're gonna have to start asking ourselves some pretty tough questions, because a lot of people won't like the answers.
And I think it's great. This is one part of your philosophy on this that I actually think is so fascinating, is that AI is going to force us into a corner where we're going to have to realize what we are. Like we can bullshit ourselves and say, I'm a guy who fills out Excel sheets. But it's
Right.
like, listen, bro, like there's going to come to a point where these machines are going to come in and just take that from everybody. And then there'll be artists who see themselves as magical treasures. And it's like, well, wait a second.
Yeah.
When the machine comes in and can do certain parts of your job, certain parts of your treasured creative work better than you
Yeah.
have to sort of say, well, what makes you, and you always
Yeah.
keep on referring back to this idea of higher order skills, decision-making skills. You know what this reminds me of an awful lot is I used to study meta learning and cognitive the ability to make better decisions and whatnot. And it constantly comes back to this, is the idea of like drifting towards the higher faculties within man and realizing that an artist is not necessarily somebody who can draw well. Of course, that's a big part of it. And it gives it a certain personality and style sometimes that you can't get otherwise. But an artist also has to know what to draw, what questions to ask, to contextualize things, what to edit, when to decide what is good and what is bad, what to clean up. Like that's what's quite interesting. And again, with creativity, my experience, I'm a very creative person, is that it's actually very much like the generative AI. If I want to create something, I'll get like 50 ideas that will flood into my mind. And 48 of them will all die, and then the last 2 will become manifest in the world, and I'll edit them and produce them. And it's actually very similar to how this AI thing shows up. It just pukes all these generations, and I kind of cut them down. So I think this is
go ahead.
I was just going to say it's really, really brilliant, and I like your unique philosophy on this. Like it's so kind of ahead of the curve, because an awful lot of people are just reacting to this, but you're sort of like, bro, I've been in the fucking dungeon for 3 years and I've been staring at this thing in the face, watching what it's doing. And I was like, I smoked the cigarettes until I burned my fingers, and I've said to myself, you know what, this is what I am in relation to
I dove to the bottom of the swamp, and I've been fighting Grendel for the past like 3-4 years, and attached to all that conversation about creativity, like we're going to ask ourselves, what is originality? Like, has anything ever in the history of mankind ever been truly original, or do we have a skewed version of what originality is? And like, this is where I often lose people because of what I'm saying next, because it's not something that people usually think of or think about or conceptualize to themselves. But the reality is this: when AI can do anything, and here's the funny thing. It can do all the creative tasks, and it's coming for the creative knowledge workforce before it comes for the truck drivers. And so when that is true, what is your role in all of it? And the long and short of it is, knowing what I know and the people I speak to and seeing what's coming, like what's already here and what's coming, we're getting to the point in the next couple of years, maybe even sooner, where your job will be that's most like a creative director. Like, you call the shots. You're a producer more than you are a laborer or worker. And like we all know, it's like and I'm sure you know, especially in what you do. But when a movie is made, the director and so on films the shots and the scenes, and they take multiple shots of a scene, and they collect and they try things and they experiment and they try lines different ways. It's a very generative process, because a lot of material is created. Because in their mind, they have a vision that might be blurry, but it's clear enough where they know what to shoot and what to experiment with. And then they end up in the editing room, and it's in the editing room where truly the magic happens. And that's where a scene that was filmed one way can flip and be turned into something else in the editing room. But that's where they are. And so they spend post-production, they spend a ton of time cutting, editing, rearranging, changing the narrative, the timeline, the Chronos timeline, the Kairos timeline. They move it all around until they end up with a finished movie that reflects their vision and their aesthetics and what they were trying to do with it. A lot of people have not spent enough time understanding the editing process in any creative work. And they haven't understood the value of judgment, like making the call, like seeing you have 10 scenes in front of you of a movie. How does the director make the call? Judgment. He or she spots something that they know this will fit. Sense of taste, knowing not just like, oh, I like pretty colors and, fluffy, this, that, the other thing, and hearts and emojis. We're talking about you having a specific aesthetic where it's not just the visuals, but it's the overall messaging and it's the overall tone of what you're saying. And so judgment, sense of taste. And for that to make sense, you got to have enough perspective where you can look at the same situations from multiple points of view, but still land on the primary perspective that you have and that will best communicate reality to the people who view the thing. And all of that requires you to have discernment. And when people hear about discernment, it's like an odd sounding word. It sounds religious and it has a lot of those connotations. And people now think, oh, we need discernment so we can tell what's real and what's false online. That's not what discernment is, because you won't be able to tell what's real and what's fake online. It's hard enough now. It's only going to get worse. Like we're getting quickly to the point where anything you see online, you cannot anymore tell the difference between what's made by AI or what's recorded by a human. Like in this video, like you're all assuming that Steph and I are real, but you don't know. And if this was made by AI, you wouldn't be able to tell. So discernment is not about what's false and what's real and what's fraud or whatever. It is more so about the ability to spot patterns. And humans are both pattern seeking animals, but we're also pattern creating animals. We will create a pattern where there in reality is none, right? So all those things together, and like, when I say this to CEOs and VPs of marketing and their teams, they're all like, okay, but they don't quite get it.
Yeah.
But here's the key difference. When I've spent a few weeks training them and they see what's possible, now they get it, because they go, what I thought was my work, writing things, content, or producing marketing assets and so on, what I thought was my work is not my work. I have to go a step above it and think of myself as a creative director, as a editor of sorts. And they realize that the skill they need to practice and hone and like sharpen are the last things that AI will do. And maybe AI never will, but it's also possible that AI will at some point, because it'll be able to make those calls, but it'll do so in a right-hand man kind of way where it does a lot of the brunt work. But they realize that we need to have a consistent perspective in our marketing materials. We need to have a consistent taste. And so companies are realizing we need to become taste makers in our market. We need to set the pace, set the taste, give people the perspective we want them to have. And so it becomes a bigger picture view of the work you do. And people are getting to the point now where they realize that's the name of the game. It's not, I thought it was do research, write a blog post, publish the blog post, or write a sales page, do research, write a sales page, do the sales. We all thought that was what we did. But it turns out that our work truly happens at a different level. And the sales page being made is just a manifestation of that deeper work that we're doing as humans. Does that make any sense?
100%. And it's not even that esoteric, because an awful lot of people I know probably struggle with this, but this is actually not necessarily new. The way I think about this, because when you're talking to me about this, I'm always trying to bring it down into analogy so my grug brain can understand it before ChatGPT comes and gets me. Is I look at the way that, for example, Red Bull does its marketing. And you'll notice that Red Bull are not too concerned about blog posts for SEO. They're not too concerned about these little things. They do something quite strange. They build brand, and they have this conceptualization, which is quite genius, that if they can get the brand strong, then there's this almost like magical effect, as if they're charging a sigil, and then downstream sales come. Like the brand gives the context for the marketing, which gives the positioning in the market, which gives the sales a sort of like juggernaut power to it. And so when you look at the way like Red Bull market, it's like, what did they do? Well, they get a load of young, handsome, extreme sports stars, get them blasted on Red Bull and caffeine, and then get them to like jump off a cliff while holding a Red Bull can. You're kind of like, that's what, like, how's that to do with me drinking anything? But it's like high energy, excitement, and Red Bull, and then all those events, Red Bull is always there. And so they become broadly associated with a big picture feeling of energy, and that creates the brand. And these are all like really intangible, high level forms of thinking, but it actually drives a powerful brand. Coke or McDonald's is another brilliant example of this, like the I'm Loving It or the McDonald's arches. These are very famous, but even though they're famous,
Wendy's burgers, all of it,
people overlook this stuff, like the feel that McDonald's gives you. this day still makes me salivate when I see McDonald's because they psyoped me when I was a kid. Like, it's amazing. And that level of thinking is so sophisticated that people overlook. And I guess what we're seeing with all of this stuff is that as we move forward with these tools, it's almost like everybody is going to be forced to this type of picture. And I see actually an awful lot in the online marketing space. Like, people are now moving towards this idea of a personal brand. Like, what's your niche? It's like, well, I do AI. I also do copywriting. I also do marketing. I also talk about Carl Jung. I talk about, it actually kind of, it starts to broaden around me. And I'm this brand, Joe Rogan's MMA psychedelics philosophy guy. Like, that's like 40 years ago. How is that even? Yeah. That's just so out of context. But now it actually makes sense because it's got this brand power to it. And actually, another thing that to drill down that's really, really important is that you were saying, for example, the arrival of these, we could call them maybe deep fakes, but the fact that people are not going to be able to tell the difference between reality as easily anymore. And this really started to hit home for me when I went up on YouTube and an ad popped up that was a Huberman on the Joe Rogan podcast, and Andrew Huberman talking about like a supplement to take. And then I saw another ad on TikTok that was Huberman talking about a supplement to take. Now, I later found out on Twitter that the one on TikTok was fake, completely made up by AI. And it hit me like a truck. I was like, I didn't realize that. And you know what's happened since? Every time an ad shows up on YouTube using that Huberman thing, I don't trust it. I look at it and I'm like, I can't believe this. And the only way I can discern it is by saying to myself, is that on brand for Huberman to say? Does that sound like something that Huberman would say? And then it all just kind of clicked in my head with what you were saying. It's like, my God, my ability to bond with that dude, form a relationship, understand the context he presents, allows me to almost know if I'm the type of information I get and is really like aligned with him and whatnot. I'm just like, wow, man, we're going into a crazy time.
But here's also where we're going. We need to go one step beyond a brand. Because a brand is just a manifestation of choices you make and what you say and style and everything else. But that's surface level. Most companies do that and they stay there because up until now, that's all you needed. But and this is why you have Burger King versus McDonald's. Like, they both have a brand, but they're selling essentially the same thing. And here's people arguing that they're not selling the same thing is why those brands are successful, because people go, no, Burger King doesn't do all the junk, and they'll have a reason as to why they pick one over the other. But that won't be enough. It won't be enough to have a brand anymore, because a brand is all about the perception of the marketplace, like what people think about you and say about you when they think about your product and so on. That won't work anymore pretty soon. And you need to have more so than just a reflection of what you want to say, style, talking points, visuals, aesthetics, and so on. Any company that has a brand or is trying to build a brand, you need to go a couple of steps or at least one step beyond it. And you need to think about what future are we communicating to people? So McDonald's has no future in their brand. It's all about if you want a burger, you buy McDonald's, and they have a reason. They have the jingles they got. It's to help you remember, I'm loving it and all this other stuff. But it's all contained and reactive to the consumer and doesn't go beyond it. Now, McDonald's has tried to bring in future perspective into it, where they try to all of a sudden add salads to their menu and to make it all green and make it all healthy. And, they try to make people go, oh, McDonald's, I can eat healthy at McDonald's. It's not really working. Some people will tell themselves that they can go to McDonald's because they'll have a salad with their Big Mac. And so they'll feel like they're making a healthy choice, but it's not really on brand with what McDonald's is. So they're stuck and they're confined to the message they can give the marketplace. And the moment the marketplace shifts too much in what they want, what they perceive, and what the choices they want to make, they lose out. And so the brand it goes back and forth depending on where the market is at. But we're getting to the point where companies will need to have a future vision so that they can lead a market and not just reflect and react to the market. So what McDonald's, as an example, not that I'm an expert on McDonald's, I don't eat at McDonald's, but as an example, they're going to have to decide, do we want to take a position in the fast food market as a whole and dictate what happens in that marketplace and set the tone, set the talking points, set the perimeter of the market, or do we just want to continue to go back and forth and be a reflection of what people want, which is people change their minds all the time, right? So you got to go beyond just, we have pretty pictures and good visuals and nice jingles and good like slogans. And you're going to, as a company, you're going to have to make a choice. How do we want to define the market? Whatever market, even if it's a small market and you're like a solopreneur, even like the clients you have, do you want to be seen as the pacemaker in a race, the animal that runs alongside to set the pace? Or do you want to keep chasing the competitor in front of you or next to you? That's where we're getting, because soon anyone can have a brand, a personal brand, a company brand, and they can have the same distribution power on the internet as everyone else. So there's no value anymore with having just a brand, because when everyone can have a brand, who cares about your brand? And when everyone can have the same distribution power as a big Fortune 100 brand versus like the small guy or girl, when the same potential with AI is here, and I can use and create visuals as good as McDonald's can create visuals. So when the playing field is leveled, there's no value in a brand anymore in a traditional sense. And you got to go a step beyond, and you need to take up leadership position in the market, and you need to become the brand or the company that sets the tone and sets the talking points and leads the pack instead of just competing against the pack. Does that make sense?
100%. So I wanted to ask you a question about that. It's sort of in the middle. If McDonald's starts to talk about health and like, start to offer salads and all that, what's the future vision there? Is McDonald's basically saying, I envision our clientele will start to evolve into the healthiest version of themselves. And so it's, instead of it just like, here, I'm just, shoveling slop down your throat, which I know a little bit rude to say, but because I actually kind of like some certain stuff that comes out of McDonald's, but they're making people guzzle. And that's like, it's sort of like, here's the food you want, and then this is what you get. But you're sort of saying if they start to establish like health parameters and they start to offer like healthy foods and maybe protein shakes or whatever, they're sort of saying you're going for a future and we're supporting you in achieving that future. And so the brand is sort of like, this is the goal here, like food redefined as healthy fast food, health fast food or something like this. And so that's what makes them stand out, is that they've got this sort of impetus and this reason for people to follow along. Is that the kind of correct way to conceptualize that?
Sort of. It's more about innovation and moving in a way that your competitor is having a hard time keeping up and chasing you. So if McDonald's starts to, and there's a lot of complications to their brand and what the food they do, but just try to simplify it. Instead of being reactive, because they started doing the health thing when they realized that their sales were dropping because people overall wanted healthy choices with their fast food instead of the slop, right? So they had a reactive approach to it. But instead of being reactive in what you do, you need to decide on where you're going in the next year to 3 years and what parts of the market you want to take over. And then you start talking about it and start acting on it fast and keep the pace up.
Oh, wow.
And confuse Burger King. So one week you start talking about, let's say they have a new salad, but you can now be so segmented that you can have your overall focus message without becoming too confusing in people's eyes, because they can take their messaging around a salad and target a specific market segment. Everyone else don't really hear about it or see it. They only go after one market segment. Burger King goes, oh shoot, like we need to do something with our salads too. And they go, maybe they chase the same market segment. But the moment they start chasing the same market segment, you then adjust your language to another market segment. And so you're being strategically pinpointing segments in your marketplace with specific messaging for each segment. And you move fast enough where Burger King is always chasing you to the next market segment, to the next product, to the next fast food option. And so they end up always chasing you and never innovating on their own. The only right choice for Burger King is that if McDonald's is saying, hey, have this healthy salad to a particular segment in the marketplace, Burger King needs to go, we're not going to do salads, we're going to do milkshakes, and we're going to go after this segment. Don't even compete and chase. You need to pick and start to strategically go after the market in segments, so that like you don't Because the moment you start chasing, that's the moment you lose.
Man, do you have any idea how, like, here's a really elegant way that I can put this, because this is exactly how high level fighting works. Like when you go and you learn to box, it starts off on, so like to bring back to the original point for the audience, like of course Sam's talking about the need for the higher cognitive skills and the realization that the people who understand what that means and learns how to capitalize on them are going to be so much better than their competitors in this new environment. They're just going to wipe the floor. Now, what do we mean by this? Then when you go in and you learn to box, obviously the first time you do it, you're standing there and you get punched in the face a lot. And so you learn to put your hands up. And then when it comes to fighting, you learn patterns. So you go in and you're like, oh, I'm going to throw my left hook, my right hook, whatever. But if you start to get really good at this, you'll come across a type of fighter who is like Floyd Mayweather. Now, when you're in the ring with Floyd Mayweather, there's this weird feeling that you have. I've never been in the ring with him, but I know this because I've fought people like this, where you will throw your best punch ever, and he'll be standing there and he'll have his face out in front of you, and you'll be like, I've got him now, the fool. And then you throw the hardest punch you can just to try to get him, and he'll just vanish, and then he'll just turn up, he'll like teleport behind you and just punch you in the back of the head, and you're like, how did he achieve this? Now what's happening is that he's gotten into the position of prediction. He's gone out of the lower quality skills of just throwing these heavy punches, and he's now elevated into this higher level. So he's like the matador. He's standing there and he's looking at you and saying, I've downloaded that this guy drops his right hand when he throws his big hard left. When he gets angry, I punch him in the nose a couple of times lightly, and then he gets angry and he throws his big left hand and he drops his right hand. So what I got to do is I got to punch him, I got to make him want to throw his big left hand, and then I'm going to step out of the way and then I'm going to smack him in the face. And he predicts this. He, in the moment, he downloads that and he sees 10 steps like chess ahead of you, and then he puts you in a reactionary position. He teases you and he sees what the plan is. He understands you, and he understands you better than you understand yourself, and he outcompetes you by out predicting you. He might not even be stronger than you. He might not even be bigger than you. He might not even be more talented than you at certain things or athletic, but because he's smarter, because he can outthink you, he defeats you. This is why you get Floyd Mayweather beating, like, prime Conor McGregor, even though he's 40 years old. Is because the brain is what does the work. And so you're sort of describing that in the marketing world, with the abundance of information, the rise of these artificial intelligence tools that can be super generative, that kind of level the playing field, perhaps in certain areas, the higher cognitive faculties are going to make people competitive. And so the people, the companies that can sit down and think about the future and assertively go for this are going to start to, those that can reach and predict and aim, and wow, like it's so crazy to think, those that are starting to think 5 years in the future and then acting now as if 5 years in the future is here now are going to be the ones that win, which is also creating this acceleration effect within the entire context of the industry, which is that's so crazy.
So
when you think
marketing becomes a competitive strategy. Like it's always companies, and down from the biggest companies down to like you and I, the small people in the world with small companies or whatever, we always think of marketing as a way to attract customers and get customers. And it's kind of like you exist, you put out your message, your visuals, this, that, the other thing, and you convert people. And then it stays in its own lane, in its own domain. But we're at the point now where marketing can become a competitive strategy, where you can use it as a way to demoralize your competitors and capture more of the market share. Because if you set the pace and if you start acting in a way that to them looks like weird, and they don't like, why is McDonald's doing this? And then they start chasing you. Meanwhile, you don't care about them because you're strategically going after certain moves and certain pockets of a market to execute on your plan. And who cares what Burger King is doing? Who cares what Wendy's is doing? Because you're acting with pinpoint precision, and you can do that now. Like you can have customized and tailored messaging to very hyper specific groups or larger segments without the other segments ever being confused by what you're saying. Like if I'm the guy who goes to McDonald's because it is slop and all I want is a Big Mac and wolf it down and like, the cheese fry, like whatever the fries are, I don't even know what they sell. But if I want that, why do I care about a salad? So if I see them selling a salad, I'd be like, that's stupid, McDonald's. Like, why are you doing that? Well, what if I never really find out about the salad and all I ever see are endless variations of Big Macs? I'm super happy. And I'll never entertain the idea of a salad because why would I care? Right. And so you can be niche and specific. And like the underlying point in all of this is that this is enabled by AI and machine learning. a lot of these very strategic moves would be hard or next to impossible to execute just a few years ago. It'd be too much. It would be too hard. It would require too many people, too many whatever. But now that AI can do like 90% of the work for you, then your marketing team becomes like, we can do the work of 100 with a team of 10 and have an outsized impact, asymmetrical impact in the marketplace because of AI.
So you could get, first of all, AI analytics to start actually generate a quite broad predictive understanding of the market that's much more vivid than people usually aware of. You could then use, for example, the creative aspects of this to sort of say, like, what would be 10 marketing plans to reach this really complex set of demographics, which is, like maybe the women, the men, the bodybuilders, the slop lovers, the cinema goers. And then figure out a way to, because of the productive power, you could actually craft individualized things for each of them. And so instead of the kind of laser focus, it's turning into like octopus marketing because of the power of these tools, which is absolutely insane. It's actually very close to how politicians have to run their like political campaigns, because they're trying to deal with like a broad array of different demographics and figuring out ways that they can reach them all. So that's very interesting.
And that's why the 2024 election in the US would be an absolute shit show.
Yeah, actually, you don't even think about stuff like that, but like that's very true. Like that's going to be the first AI. General election. Wow. Because even I think about the deep fakes thing, and remember they were saying that Trump got arrested in New York or something like that happened. I don't follow that stuff too closely, but then all these pictures came up of Trump arrested, and of course, if you look closer, you're like, that's Mid-Journey. But just when they pop up on Twitter, you're like, I was like, Trump. It looked like Trump went down fighting, man.
Yeah, and so your reaction is real. It's like the thing is, your reaction and the amygdala and everything else is a real reaction to what's fake.
Oh man.
So you're getting a shot of stress cortisol that screws with your body in reaction to a fake thing. Do you see how like the potential for damage is pretty big? Because like if you're online a lot of the day, you constantly get hit by cortisol stress reactions and dopamine hits, and like your body chemistry will be messed up by the end of the day, and that in turn just screws with your cognitive abilities and just screws with your body. But like this is like do you see like the potential for a lot of bad stuff to happen is pretty big.
Like I remember in the 2016 election cycle, wasn't the word fake news just being thrown around everywhere because it was such a powerful concept. It's like that's made up, that's not true, and it's just dismissive. And now we're entering into a legitimate thing where it's like, okay, wait a second, that literally could just be like entirely fake. That whole speech that guy did, did he actually say that? Is that slightly edited? Wow, man, that's gonna be an interesting tussle, man. That's gonna be an interesting tussle. But here, I don't want to hold you too much longer. Right. I just want to ask you a couple of kind of roundup questions, because we've gone deep into the kind of philosophical side of things. But I have I'm wondering, when you're dealing with people, marketers are coming across this, how much is this turning into like a sort of, you're psychoanalyzing people or helping people get through the fear and feeling like overwhelmed, and people are coming up to you and asking you an awful lot of questions. I'm sure there's huge anxiety or huge kind of interest in them about, all right, how can I leverage this stuff to give myself incredible power? I'm worried about what's going to happen. There's this sort of just unknown chaos feeling and this FOMO, the fear of missing out and whatnot. And how much do you find yourself trying to like coach people to just calm down a little bit and try to think from first principles? What's your experience like that been? And give us your kind of general thoughts.
So that's most of the work that I end up doing. So people come to marketing teams and CEOs and entrepreneurs come to me because they want to find ways to integrate AI and machine learning into what they do. And so they see that as the thing they hire me for. How do we get my team to use it? What tools do we use? How do we use it? How do we start producing marketing collateral and assets with all this stuff? And so they come for that, and we engage on that to start. But then as our engagement progresses, it becomes more and more about just mentally and emotionally preparing people for what's happening, for what's coming, helping them to stop coping with it. Because I've seen all the coping mechanisms at this point. And at the end of the day, they all go away, and they have to they get to the point where all the coping goes away.
Could you describe a few? Like what things do you notice? Like what rationalization?
The most obvious ones that we've all seen is, AI will never be as good as, AI will never do this. And then they go, AI will never be creative. Like it'll never be innovative. It'll never create something new. We are already there. It's already doing it. And then they go, well, like if I put something out online, like people will be able to tell that a human made it. No,
Yeah, sorry about that.
from text to image to video and audio, no, it's already people can't tell, and it's only going to get worse. And then go, well, if a human makes it, it has value. I'm like, yeah, it might have value to you, or maybe like your dog and your wife, or your boyfriend or girlfriend. But in the marketplace, if someone sees an ad, no one cares who was made by. No one goes, a human made this ad, therefore is more valuable, therefore I'm going to click it. Hardly anyone, no one does that, right? And so it's all the way from AI will never be able to do this, all the way to because a human made it, it has inherently more value that other people can perceive. And that's not true. You can perceive it because you wrote a thing. So to you, it has value. But to other people who don't know, it has no value. And like, I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm just saying like, this is what's happening. And then all the way to, well, we can't have AI do all the things. And like, we need to have humans do things. And I say, yeah, that's eventually the goal we want to get to. The goal I'm trying to get people to is, even though AI can now do most things and soon maybe all the things, it does not mean that that's how everything has to go. Just because you can replace your whole marketing team with a bunch of robots and you have one person in charge of all the robots, that doesn't mean that that's what you should therefore do. Like, we'll get to the point where you'll have one person companies that has robots for departments, or like 10 people in a company, and the rest is handled by robots, and it's selling for like the revenue is like 200 million a year. It's nothing huge. What used to require like 5,000 employees can now be done by 5. We're getting to that point. It does not mean that you have to do it that way. So the end of the cope, when all the cope is gone, the one thing that I say to them is, you're soon going to have, either you'll make this choice or the choice will be made for you, where you decide where the line goes. How much of your life and your work do you want to have taken over by AI? And you get to decide. Just because you might be able to 100% replace you, is that what you want to do? Just because you have a company that can be run by like 5 people and produce an insane amount of revenue and value in the marketplace, is that the right choice to make? Is that the best decision to make? So either you make that choice as to how much AI you want in your life, or the choice will be made for you.
Now,
that's the end of the cope.
There's one last question I'd have with this, because is there a aspect of entropy here, or maybe the entropy is the wrong word, like inertia, like Schopenhauerian pessimism, I guess is what I'm getting at, where it's like in the long run, the efficiency of the 5-man team with the army of robots is going to dominate all the others. To give you a context for this, in music, this has actually already happened. Like everybody, what was the symphony orchestra? The symphony orchestra was 100 people who have trained for their entire lives, conducted by a masterful conductor that produces some of the most angelic music you've ever heard. Now, nowadays, those guys are beat out financially by one dude with a Ableton on his laptop, banging out tunes and banging out techno and whatnot. And maybe like the technoism is ascendant and all this, it certainly has its charm, but like maybe it lacks that sort of vivid divine power and all this. But the sheer force of entropy, of inertia, of the direction things are going, the efficiency of the way that he runs things kind of leads him to his position. And do you feel that like this is one part of it where, like, I think this is a major anxiety, is that it's going to be like another technological movement that just steamrolls everybody, and there's going to be a lot of people who maybe idealistically want to resist it, maybe like the guys who are like, we should stick with the symphony orchestras, but the problem is that they're just going to get crushed in the long game due to things like efficiency and what to do about that. What are your thoughts on that? And maybe we can wrap it up then at that point.
Fundamentally, the future we're looking at, and the future is coming hard and fast, is that this can either dehumanize us, as in remove humans from much of the equation as to what happens in the world, or it can give us an opportunity to humanize what we do and how we do it. And the choice, like I said, will be made for you or you make it. And even though technological process happens and is happening quickly, we have this false idea that just because tech is happening means that it is inevitable. And that's not true. Nothing about tech is inevitable. Nothing about AI is inevitable. There's nothing about it. People think and feel like this is happening and I got no choice or agency or option in the matter. And that's not true. You do have choice and agency in everything that's happening with AI. Because for the first time, and maybe not first time, but for the first time in a long time, this kind of technological process gives us the option as to how much of it we want and how much of it we need. And so you got to make the choice at some point. And I hope most people choose the side of humanizing, as in limiting the use of AI to certain things, because nothing about AI is inevitable. It feels like it. It's coming hard and fast. It feels like they have no choice, but it's not true. You do have a choice, and you can exert agency in all of this. And because the potential for AI is so huge, it also means that it's also possible to limit it and to rein it in a way that is useful for humans, instead of becoming this all-consuming God that takes over everything. And all we have left to do is like bow down and kiss the feet. It doesn't have to be that way. There's no inevitability to it. It's not set in stone. It is not predetermined that this is what will happen. We have a choice as to how much of it we want.
Awesome. That reminds me an awful lot of Elon Musk's sentiments around this, where he's constantly lobbying and saying, like, there's no reason why we can't put down our foot down and sort of like talk about how we shape this thing, because it's like nuclear weapons, like nuclear energy can be transformed into nuclear fission, or it can be used to blow up the entire planet. And that really does come down to a question of judgment. It's like, well, what are we going to use this technology to manifest? And of course, man is going to rush towards the big bomb, but it's actually got far more productive powers that it can do that people overlook an awful lot. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. And as you can see, Sam has been in this for many, many years. He's thought about it deeply. He's way ahead of the curve with an awful lot of this stuff. He's going actively around to conferences, talking to a lot of companies, a lot of big companies that are getting involved in this, and pretty much every big company in the world is interested in this. He's talking to them all. Obviously, following this channel, I recommend you drop a comment down below, subscribe, do all that type of stuff, because he's going to give you that kind of advantage to understand where the high level people are at with the talking points of it. He'll show you how to adapt to it into your life. He'll help you understand that it's sort of a psychological process for a lot of people. This is the transformation of work. During the Industrial Revolution, people got pulled out of farms, put into cities, and that was really hard for a lot of people. Some people ended up sickly and diseased. It's the same sort of thing here. We have this rapid transformation. You need to be able to adapt to it. This is your greatest skill as a human, your ability to adapt to environments. We have a rapidly changing environment. So we have this gentleman, Sam, who is rushing forward with it. And you have the Bionic Marketing down below that you can subscribe to. Thank you very much for your time. Sam, if you have any last words, then we can wrap it up.
I got nothing.
Beautiful. All right, there we go. Let's whip out ChatGPT there. We'll do last words or something like that to see what's going on. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I'll see you later. Bye-bye.